is scrutiny of figuring out what is going on to the paranormal. And in terms of nuts and bolts ufology, this is not really nuts and bolts ufology. This is definitely of the high strangeness type. The Mothman came really to public, even though it undoubtedly predates this, came to public attention during the sightings in West Virginia. But here to tell you all about that, and no doubt other sightings, would you please welcome your speaker, Denis Doyle.
How do, folks? Right, today I'm going to talk about a subject which I believe is not as well known over here as it is in the United States. So, just out of interest, how many of you here have heard of the legend of the Mothman? Just show of hands roughly. Well, that's good, so there's quite a few, that's fine. There have been many legends and sightings of winged humanoid creatures. Sorry, just before I continue, is the sound okay? Yeah. There have been many legends and sightings of winged humanoid creatures over the centuries, such as Spring-Heeled Jack, the Jersey Devil, and of course, good old Satan himself. But the creature we will be looking at today is more of a recent phenomenon, which became known as the Mothman, and has developed a fairly large cult following, especially in the USA. As I said, with it being such a huge following in the USA, there's a fair amount of Mothman-related merchandise being available, including children's toys, colouring and Dr. Doc books, plus tattoos, and of course many, many magazines, and, would you believe, even books like this. Now, I think you'll find even the author's name's a bit suspect. So, now, you've got to ask yourself, who would be sad enough to go out and buy a book like that? I would like to thank Alison for the loan of the book. To tell you what I'm going to do, I've not read it, it's the world's shortest book, it's 26 pages long, I genuinely haven't read it, but I'm going to put it up as a raffle prize, so whoever wins it can contact me and let me know what the hell happens in that. Okay, folks. Our story begins in America, in the state of West Virginia, and in particular, the city of Point Pleasant and the surrounding area. Just to locate Point Pleasant on the map, is it just here, on the border with the state of Ohio and West Virginia here? Here is a nice aerial view of Point Pleasant, taken around the early 60s, clearly showing the bridges that crossed the Ohio River. Point Pleasant is a picturesque and relatively quiet historic area, and although designated as a city, it only has a population of around 4,500. It's not that many. On the 10th of October, 1774, the Battle of Point Pleasant, which was fought on the future site of the town, which some people consider was the first battle of the American War of Independence. It has become a popular tourist destination within the USA, and the legend of the Mothman has grown within the region over the years, with many festivals and museums dedicated to the creature, including the annual Mothman Festival and the Mothman Museum and Research Centre. One of the early theories regarding the strange happenings in the area relates to a curse put on the area over 250 years ago. Some believe the Mothman was sent to Point Pleasant as part of a centuries-old curse placed on the district when, during the 18th century, a native Indian chief called Chief Cornstalk and 3 other natives from his tribe, including his son, came to the area on a peacekeeping mission, only to be later taken prisoner and then executed. As the chief lay dying, he uttered a curse. "I came to your house as a friend, and you murdered me. You have murdered by my side my son, and for this may the curse of the Great Spirit rest upon this spot." So that's one of the early theories as to why the area is plagued by these strange happenings. There's many other theories regarding the Mothman's sudden appearances, but we'll look at them a bit later. Okay, now we jump to the winter of 1966, and the good people of Point Pleasant and the nearby towns of Glendenning and Salem began to witness several sightings of a strange flying humanoid creature. On the 12th of November 1966, 5 men were digging a grave at the local cemetery near Glendenning, when suddenly a large brown-coloured figure took off from the trees and flew over them. When later questioned, they said it did not look like a bird, but appeared to be a man with wings. They later went on to say it appeared to glide through the trees and was visible for about a minute. Unfortunately, that's all the information I could find on this particular incident, but the next sighting, 2 days later, on the 14th of November, has more detail. Newell Partridge was at his home in Salem when he began experiencing interference on his TV, and at the same time his dog, who was called Bandit, started barking outside. Newell went out to investigate and was amazed to see some type of big machine or craft with coloured flashing lights in the field next to his barn. Nearby, he spotted a large creature with glowing red eyes in a tree. His dog, a large German Shepherd, took off in pursuit of the creature. It's worth noting that the glowing red eyes are to become one of the most prominent and frightening features that witnesses report. Newell tried calling the dog back without any success. So he went back inside his house to collect his loaded shotgun. But when he returned, the creature, strange craft, and his dog were not to be seen. Despite a search the following morning, the dog was never found. A couple of days later, Newell read in the local newspaper about an incident 90 miles away at Point Pleasant, in which a similar creature was sighted. A statement in the paper from a Mr. Roger Scarberry, who we will learn more about in a second, stated that as Mr. Scarberry and fellow passengers had driven into the city limits of Point Pleasant, they had noticed the body of a large dog laying at the side of the road. But very shortly afterwards, on their journey back out of town, the group had stopped to look for the body of the dog, but it was now gone. Okay, we now move to November the 15th, 1966, 3 days after the sighting in the graveyard. And at around 11:30 p.m, 2 couples, Linda and Roger Scarberry and Steve and Mary Maletti, were out for a late evening drive in their car. It was a very clear but cold night, and as the vehicle came over the brow of a hill, a small hill, in a remote part of Point Pleasant, known locally as the TNT area, their car headlights suddenly lit up a strange creature. Linda went on to describe the creature in detail in a little-known interview undertaken in 2001. It was about 7 feet tall and had wings that were visible on its back. The tips of the wings could be seen above its shoulders. The body of it was slender. The body was like a slender, muscular man and flesh-coloured. Its wings were ashen white in colour and looked like angel wings, she added. Linda continued, its face could not be seen because the eyes simply hypnotised you when you looked into them. It wasn't that it didn't have a head, it was just that when your eyes got close to its head and neck area, its eyes consumed your vision and you couldn't see anything but them. Linda's statement concluded, it had one of its wings caught in a guide wire near a section of the road close to a disused power plant in the TNT area. It was pulling on its wing with its hands, trying to free itself. Its hands were really big. It looked scared, she said. Okay, at this point, I'm just going to give you a little bit more information on the TNT area, or the McClintock Wildlife Area, as it is now known. During World War II, a large area 6 miles north of Point Pleasant was given over to help the war effort. This area became known as the West Virginia Ordnance Works, which was used in the manufacture and storage of TNT, hence the name. It was a huge development of over several hundred acres, and many of the reinforced concrete buildings and structures were still standing in 1966. One of the bomb-proof concrete storage domes, known as igloos, can be seen on the left. There was also a network of tunnels in the area, which apparently some locals have claimed helped the Mothman to move about freely without being seen. By all accounts, it was a creepy place to be after dark. The site was decommissioned in 1945 and plans put in place to convert the area into a wildlife sanctuary and into an industrial development area as well. Unfortunately, in the military's hurry to leave the site, a number of oil drums containing toxic chemicals were left behind. These drums then slowly rotted over the years, leaking the toxic chemicals into the ground and surrounding area. A massive clean-up operation was still taking place in 1999. This gave rise to one of the other theories regarding the Mothman, in which the contaminants in the ground had caused the Mothman to somehow mutate. The image on the left is of an abandoned power plant in the area, which Linda mentions in her next statement. So, that's here, that's the abandoned power plant. Okay. So, now let's return to our couples in their car. Unsurprisingly, they decided not to hang around for long after spotting the creature, with the others in the car shouting to the driver to go, go, go. The creature finally got its wing free and then ran into the power plant. Linda added, it didn't make any sound at all when we saw it at this time. They decided to head back down Route 62 towards Point Pleasant, but as the group were leaving the TNT area, they approached a bend in the road and their headlights once again lit up the creature, this time sitting on top of a billboard. It then suddenly and silently and very rapidly shot straight up into the air. Linda's statement then continues. That's when it followed us, and it hit the roof of the car 2 or 3 times while we were doing a speed way above 100 miles per hour. I mean, I personally don't know of any flying animal that can maintain speeds of 100 miles an hour while in parallel flight, so it's certainly quite a bizarre happening. Linda then states, the last place we saw it was sitting on top of the flood wall. It was sitting crouched down with its arms around its legs and its wings tucked against its back. The frightened party then drove to the county sheriff's office to report the incident, and they all returned to the TNT area with Deputy Millard Halstead, but the creature was gone. It was on this trip back to the TNT area with the deputy that the two couples had stopped to look for the body of the dog that I'd mentioned previously. It was reported in one of the local newspapers that the deputy had said the thing was gone, but that he had found a strange pile of dust in the area where the creature had been standing. The following day, November the 16th, a press conference was called at the local courthouse, in which the deputy went on to say that he had known all the couples most of his life, and he took their story very seriously. Okay, interestingly, it was at this press conference that the odd flying creature was dubbed the Mothman. This was due to the very popular Batman TV series and comics at the time. Issue 73 of the DC Batman comic had introduced a new villain called Killer Moth, and from this the newspaper journalist created the name Mothman. The event was printed in the local newspapers, and news of the unusual occurrence quickly spread across the country via the national press, creating the legend of the Mothman. Now, I find the choice of the name Mothman a little strange, because as you recall, Linda's description was definitely more angel-like. She stated a muscular human, flesh-coloured skin with ashen white wings. But this just goes to show how the power of popular television and pop culture can influence these things over time. Okay. On the same day as the press conference had taken place, but later in the evening, another, and in my opinion, creepier incident took place. In 1966, there were not many houses around the TNT area, for obvious reasons. One of the exceptions to this was the home of the Ralph Thomas family. On the evening of the 16th of November, they noticed a funny red light hovering over the TNT area. They had later stated it wasn't an aeroplane, but we couldn't quite figure out what it was. Later that evening, a friend of the family, a Mrs. Marcella Bennett, had driven to the Thomases' home, and as she stepped from her car holding her baby, a figure suddenly appeared near the vehicle. It appeared as though it had been laying down, as she later recalled. I think that's a definite change of underpants scenario there, I would have thought. Mrs. Bennett described it as slowly rising up from the ground, grey in colour and bigger than a man with terrible glowing eyes. She said she was so horrified she dropped her little girl, but quickly recovered, picked her child up and ran to the house. Once inside, the family locked all the doors, but the creature just shuffled around the house, peering into the windows. The police were called, but the thing had disappeared by the time they arrived. The police did not make a mockery of what the family reported and believed what the witnesses were telling them, not least because they had seen that Marcella had been injured. Marcella Bennett has described it as the most frightening experience of her life, and something she felt uncomfortable talking about. She was deeply traumatised and could not sleep for a long time after the event. I would think I could hear its wings flapping and noise on top of the roof. I kept feeling that the thing had followed us home, she said. Somehow she felt the creature now had a link to her and would come back. She never drove at night after that experience. It was close enough to harm me, but it didn't, she later reported. Another area the Mothman has become infamous for is as a foreteller of doom. If anyone has seen the movie, The Mothman Prophecies, this is central to the plot of the movie. But as usual for a Hollywood film, this does not reflect the true Mothman story. But it's a good psychological thriller all the same. In December 1967, almost a year on from the initial encounters, sightings of the Mothman had begun to subside. Although several people claimed to have seen the creature around the Silver Bridge area of Point Pleasant at around this time, with one witness claiming to have seen the creature sitting atop the bridge on one of the girders. Then, on December the 15th, 1967, the 700-foot bridge linking Point Pleasant to the Ohio suddenly collapsed while filled with rush hour traffic. 46 people died in the tragedy. 2 of the victims were never found. Locals began to ask, was the Mothman trying to warn them of impending danger? The Mothman sightings abruptly stopped after the collapse of the bridge, although reports of men in black intimidating witnesses and reporters were documented at this time, further adding to the mystery. The Silver Bridge disaster is not the only foretelling of doom involving a flying humanoid or Mothman-like creature. In Freiburg, Germany, in 1978, a group of coal miners witnessed a large creature with glowing red eyes and wings on its back standing at the pit entrance. It suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream, then flew off. The miners ran from the pit, too frightened to return. Then, 1 hour later, there was a seismic rumble and the mine collapsed. Had the creature been trying to warn the coal miners? It became known locally as the Freiburg Shrieker. Then, in 1985, in the area of Chernobyl, in the Ukraine, scientists and workers witnessed a large bird-like creature with red eyes and the body of a man hovering around the nuclear facility prior to the disaster. Locals in the nearby town of Pripyat, which was later evacuated and abandoned due to radiation, claimed to have seen the strange creature which they nicknamed the Blackbird of Chernobyl. In 2001, in New York, there had also been reports of a winged creature flying near the Twin Towers. And then in Japan, people had reported, then in 2011 in Japan, people had reported a large red-eyed winged creature circling the nuclear power plant of Fukushima prior to the earthquake and the explosions there. Mothman sightings were even blamed for an outbreak of swine flu in the town of La Junta in Mexico in 2009. I think at this point it's worth mentioning the so-called Mothman curse or Mothman death list. Like a lot of these paranormal or unusual events, a folklore quickly develops regarding a curse or mysterious deaths connected to it. The Mothman is no exception. In the magazine, the 14 Times, dated September 2004, there is a complete section given over to a list of 77 people who have died suddenly or mysteriously who have had a connection with the Mothman mystery. The list includes witnesses, actors, writers, movie and documentary makers. I'm not convinced by the list, as quite a few of these people died in their 50s, 60s and 70s of heart attacks. So, which in itself isn't unusual. But as I'm 56 and doing a talk on the Mothman, let's not tempt fate. Okay, let's have a look now at some possible theories and explanations for the Mothman. These are all artist or witness drawings of the creature, with the one on the right being a copy of the original sketch done by Roger Scarborough, one of the 4 people in the car in the TNT area back in 1966. It's interesting to note the images differ slightly from Linda's description of a flesh-coloured muscular man with ashen white angel-type wings again. Although the wings being visible above its head and the glowing red eyes have remained a constant, one of the first theories put forward was that the witness had actually seen a sandhill crane, which had been known to land in the area during migration. Okay, the sandhill crane has an average height of about 4 feet, but has been known to grow as tall as 6 feet. And as you can see from the images, it has bright red feathers around its eyes. So in theory, it could be, you've got the sort of 6 foot height and you've got the sort of splash of red colour around the eyes. So in theory, it could be. But I think the next slide kind of rules it out. I'm not convinced by this theory because, as you can see from these 2 images, the sandhill crane has a long, slender neck, which was never a feature in any of the witness descriptions, not to mention its very inhuman-looking legs. Another bird theory is that the witness had mistakenly seen an owl. So that's quite a striking picture, I think you'll agree, and certainly, if we go back, it certainly fits the description of 1 or 2 of these eyewitness drawings of the Mothman. If you compare owls to some of the descriptions and artist's impression, there is a definite similarity, although what lets this theory down is its size. Owls are rarely more than 2 or 3 feet tall, and certainly never 6 or 7 feet tall. So if you can see from these 2 images how the theory came about, with the position of the eyes and the shape of the wings. Certainly a compelling argument, I think you'll agree. These images again show some of the similarities in which an owl could be mistaken. Although as I said earlier, I think what lets it down is its height. It's only 2-3 feet high, whereas witness claim that the Mothman was more 6-7 feet high. Very briefly, some of the other theories include, as mentioned earlier, the creature was a mutant caused by the contamination in the TNT area, or it's from another dimension, or, and this was quite popular at the time, it was a hoax designed to help generate tourism into the area. And finally, and I think this is my favourite, it's an alien being. I like this theory as there are a catalogue of UFO related events in and around the area at this time, but unfortunately due to time constraints we can't cover them today, although I have selected one notable incident to mention here. During the Mothman sightings of 1966 and 1967, there were an increase in UFO sightings in the Point Pleasant area, with over 500 reports between these dates. There was also mention of Men in Black activity in and around that part of West Virginia. One such report was from Mary Hare, who was the Point Pleasant correspondent for the Ohio newspaper, The Messenger. Mary had written extensively about the Mothman and UFO sightings and had received hundreds of phone calls and reports from witnesses regarding strange lights in the skies. Then, on one evening in January 1967, she was working late when a strange man walked into the office. He was a very short man and had peculiar eyes that were covered with thick glasses. He also had long black hair that was cut squarely like a bowl haircut. He appeared to speak very slowly and hesitantly, as if he had some sort of speech impediment, and went on to ask Mary for directions to another part of West Virginia. The weird man started to move closer to Mary, his strange eyes acting almost hypnotically, making Mary feel uncomfortable. So she went to call for her colleague, who was just next door. At that moment, the phone rang, and as Mary answered, she noticed a stranger pick up a pen from her desk and look at it in amazement, as if he had never seen a pen before. He then began to laugh loudly and ran out of the building. To be honest, I've worked with people like that myself. Several weeks later, Mary was crossing the road near her office when she noticed the strange little man. When he suddenly realised Mary was watching him, he became startled and quickly made his way to a large black car which was parked nearby. He stepped into the vehicle, which then very quickly drove off. Now, a few people may be thinking, that's fine, it's all in the past, we don't have to concern ourselves with the Mothman anymore. Not true. It appears the Mothman has moved house for some reason. There have been numerous sightings in the Chicago and surrounding area of flying humanoid and Mothman-type creatures. Sightings began as far back as 1981 and continue to this day, with over 60 witness sightings between 2017 and 2018. These images are from August 2011. A husband and wife were on a shopping trip to Chicago and decided to try out their new camera phone on the Indian statue landmark, which is famous in the area. It wasn't until they got home and checked the images more carefully that they noticed a strange flying object. I mean, I can't think offhand that matches any known flying craft that we know of. The next two slides show an artist's impression of winged humanoid creatures seen by several witnesses around the lakefront area of Chicago in 2017. Witnesses constantly describe a large bat or bird-like creature, although in a small number of cases they are described as insect-like with humanoid features such as arms and legs. Here are some examples of the Chicago sightings. Tammy was out walking the dog in the Oz Park area of Chicago when she spotted a strange-looking humanoid creature with its back to her. Her dog, a Jack Russell, began cowering behind her. The creature then turned around to look at her, and as she noticed its eyes seemed to have an unnatural glow. Tammy described it as being mainly black in colour, although the wings appeared slightly grey and leathery, almost bat-like in appearance. She also noted the wings were folded behind the creature, which seemed to rise about a foot above its head. Again, very similar to the Mothman descriptions earlier on. After staring at Tammy for approximately 15 seconds, it unfurled its wings, which appeared to be roughly 8 to 10 feet from wingtip to wingtip. It then leaped into the air with the minimum of effort and was gone within seconds, making a loud screeching sound. It disappeared over the rooftops, and Tammy did not see it again. The next witness chose to remain anonymous, but stated whilst driving down Lake Street, Chicago, she noticed a huge flying humanoid figure gliding above a nearby 4-story apartment building. She stated it had a 10-foot wingspan with bat-like wings which were dark in colour and never actually appeared to fly. Its body was long and thin, being approximately 6 to 8 feet in length. She watched the creature for about 10 seconds before it disappeared behind a building and she lost sight of it. Lastly, for these sightings, on the 12th of April 2018, 2 elderly women walking along Greenway Avenue, Chicago, heard a deep bellowing sound from a nearby area of intersection. As they both looked in the direction of the noise, a dark winged being flew in front of them at a height of approximately 15 feet or so. It then disappeared from sight. With all of these recent sightings in the Chicago area, some local people have begun to worry it may be a foretelling of some kind of disaster in the near future. Okay, as with most paranormal events, getting a decent photograph of the Mothman has remained elusive. Here are several of the better images I have found via the internet. Hopefully, one day, someone will achieve a good quality piece of HD footage. I read a feature regarding this one in which somebody claims it's possibly an eagle with a snake in its claws. So, I don't personally see that, but that's what the person claimed it could be. Okay, just before I finish my talk, I would like to add a small section about another incident which took place just over a week before the gravediggers, Neil Partridge and TNT area sightings. By the way, this print I've ordered from America. It's a limited edition print. I think there was 30 of them. The artist has signed it, and I've put it in to the raffle as a raffle prize for later if anyone is interested. Okay, this odd event began on November the 2nd, 1966, around 7:30 p.m, predating the gravediggers, Neil Partridge and the TNT area sightings by over 10 days. So this is 10 days before the group of sightings. That's one thing I've found when I've been looking at this Mothman, that nobody in America seems to have a name like John Smith or Dave Adams or something like that. They've all got weird names. This one's an exception. Woodrow Deringberger. I should have looked at that first before I decided to. Anyway, this chap, Woodrow Deringberger, a salesman for a sewing machine company, was returning home from Marietta, Ohio, to his home in Mineral Wells, West Virginia, along Highway I-77. As he was approaching the city of Parkersburg, West Virginia, another vehicle suddenly and unexpectedly flew past him. Woodrow described the vehicle as the strangest thing he'd ever seen, saying it resembled a kerosene lamp chimney, hovering about 6 inches off the ground. The strange vehicle came around him and then turned sideways across both lanes of the carriageway in front of Woodrow's truck, forcing him to slow down and finally stop at the side of the road. A door on the object then opened and a man in a dark outfit stepped out. The door of the craft then shut with a loud thunk behind him. The vehicle then climbed to approximately 40 feet and appeared to float above the highway. As the man approached Woodrow's truck, he noted he was average looking in many ways. He had a deep tan, dark hair which was swept back, and although a deep tan was unusual for the time of year, the most striking thing about his appearance was, without doubt, the unnatural and somewhat eerie grin on his face. The strange man headed to the right side of the truck, and Woodrow noted he was wearing a dark overcoat with what appeared to be some kind of green metallic-looking outfit beneath, which occasionally glistened in the light. His arms remained folded, and both sets of knuckles seemed to nestle within his own armpits. The following conversation between the strange humanoid and Woodrow were all done telepathically throughout, with not a single word from either of them being spoken verbally. The grinning man spoke first, asking Woodrow to roll down his window, adding he meant him no harm. He then asked Woodrow his name, and in response identified himself as Indrid Cold. He then added he came from a place less powerful than the United States, and that he was flesh and blood just like Woodrow and in no way special. The strange being then noticed the lights coming from Parkersburg in the distance and asked Woodrow what is over there. Woodrow told him it was the city of Parkersburg, to which the strange man replied, "Is that where the people live?" "No," said Woodrow, "it's more a place of business. Most of the people live on the outskirts of the town," Woodrow answered. Cold went on with his strange questions for a little while longer, until he seemed satisfied with what he had learned. At one point, even openly encouraging Woodrow to report the encounter to the authorities, and told him that confirmation would follow. He finally looked at Woodrow and said, "It's been nice talking to you, Mr. Derenberger. We will be seeing you again," and started walking away from the truck. As he did so, the strange craft began to descend back to the highway. The door opened on the flying object. Cold climbed back into the vehicle, and it flew off at high speed. I have deliberately left this event till the end as opinion is divided as to whether it is linked to the Mothman case or just a coincidence. My opinion is it is almost certainly connected, but the legend of the grinning man is a talk for another day. That's all from me. Hope you've enjoyed my talk, and I would just like to thank Alison, Malcolm and Ron for giving me this opportunity, and I would also like to thank Bedtime Stories, which is a YouTube channel, for allowing the use of some of their images. Thank you.